Welcome back to this week's episode of Behind the Agency. This week, I'm excited to have Dan Englander here from SalesSchema. We hang out in a lot of the same circles and talk with a lot of the same people. And I thought it was about time that we actually talked with each other on the show. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I know one thing that you're kind of known for is your thinking around referrals. A lot of agencies think about referrals as something that just, they happen when they happen, but you've kind of made a point of talking about them as something that you deliberately engineer. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. And I'll kind of give you a long-winded roundabout answer. That's okay. And a little bit about my story. But I come from the agency space originally, started like working in social media on the account side, quickly kind of moved or fell into a biz dev role for a creative house. And this was in New York City, circa, let's call it like 2012-ish or something. And I was, trying to get business for kind of a weird product. It was like high-end animated video being sold into large companies and funded startups and that kind of thing. So I did a lot of networking and going to conferences at the Javits Center and going to like meetups and coffees, and we had people on commission structures, and like we made it work, but we never really got business that way. And I think it was because like we sold weird stuff to rare people, and also I was doing it wrong. I was, for reasons I can get into. But anyway, I started my company SalesSchema after that in like 2014, and for like 10 years we were doing outbound for agencies, like, sending cold email and stuff to get people meetings, and it worked. And then it stopped working. And I think what happened was there was a lot of skepticism and noise that kind of started bubbling up in the space. An agency at the end of the day, from the outside looking in, is a business that people can start online with an internet connection. So like the digital boom post 2020 got even busier. And nowadays, I think like with AI, it's just accelerated massively. So like the idea that you're going to close business or even just get a meeting with like a skeptical CMO of a significant company or whatever title you're going after, I think is becoming more unrealistic, that you're going to like come up with the right combination of words to get them just to talk to you. So I think to answer your question in a roundabout way, I think that for most of our clients, referrals are the thing that's always worked. And there's been a lot of these myths, some of which I shared, that referrals don't work or like referrals don't scale or whatever. And the fact is like they really do. They do work, and you can engineer them. And I think that to answer your question, a lot of what's sort of pushed us in that direction is that it's getting tougher and tougher for complex service businesses to build that trust outside of these intros and these circles and these communities and these things that really tell somebody like, hey, this is worth paying attention to. This person's worth having in your life before you have the need. So that's sort of what's moved us in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like you were saying, like AI and a lot of these cold outbound sorts of approaches, it's created a lot more noise. And I think the signal, that you need to find is really through those personal relationships. I think in general, like agencies, especially because they tend to sell higher ticket items, the focus on it being a relationship driven business, I think has become even more and more important.
Yeah. And I think like this thing that a lot of people have called the trust recession has squeezed all offers, right? Because there's so many options, and there's so much garbage, and there's so much noise. But especially if you sell, a high ticket complex service where like somebody could literally lose their job if they make the wrong decision. And many are, at more risk of that happening than they once were for a lot of reasons. Trust is an even bigger factor. So I think in a lot of ways, like, what's old is new again in a little bit, in a lot of ways. Like, I think this has a weird dovetail with like PR becoming a bigger thing and becoming like a bigger signal again, because it's just harder to figure out like what's worth trusting. So there's a lot of this like in geo is tying into that, I think, is looking at these older signals. But I digress. But yeah, I'll leave it at that, and then we can dig more into how we're doing it and so on. But
yeah. Well, I know another thing we had talked about previously was that, when people go and try to figure out biz dev or marketing, whatever, for themselves, they're basically taking a bunch of tips and tricks from kind of the SaaS world, not things that were really made for complex service businesses like agencies. What do you feel like is like the biggest thing that a lot of maybe like the worst advice that agencies maybe take that is really meant for SaaS?
Yeah, I'll kind of like, sorry to meander around your question, but it's just to like give a little context on that. I think like back to the trust thing, I think because of this trust recession, most of our clients, if not all of them, have headed towards specialization. And I know you have a lot of great content on how important that is. So if you specialize, like by default, or your market tends to get smaller, right? So there's fewer people to go after. So with that in mind, like on just sort of a mathematical level, if your market gets smaller, a lot of these tips, tricks, plays, whether it's SaaS or it's a down market SMB agency or something, they just don't work as well, right? Because it's like they're all kind of paint by numbers, and I'm not against painting by numbers. Like we're all working with numbers, right? There's like a certain need to get, hey, this many meetings to get a proposal, to get this, to get that. The numbers matter, but the numbers get smaller as you get specialized. So like a lot of this, oh, we have this play and it gets this % open rate, it gets this % reply rate, it gets this % meeting rate. Like that tends to break down as you're like, hey, most of my really good fit clients could fit into a high school gym. Like it tends to fall apart a little bit. So I'm not saying that we're against outbound. We still do outbound for clients, and there's a place that it lives, but it's not going to be the thing that like gets you those meetings every week that you can like rest your hat on, basically. So that's one of the biggest things. I think another thing is that like a lot of the tips, tricks, hacks, all that stuff, software, sort of presupposes that you have like all the hours in the day just to focus on prospecting and sales, or you have a team and people. And for a lot of our clients, even those that are like towards the high sevens, like it's often like one biz dev person full time, maybe somebody helping them, and that these are even in the big agencies sometimes. So it's like a lot of it's not, there's a lot of this talk of like, well, you could do this works and that works. It's like really about finding that 80-20. And our whole thing is like, hey, this isn't the best fit for everybody, but if you have a complex service, selling up market, not all the hours in the day, resource limited, what is the best thing? And I think a lot of the times it's these circles, these relationships, these referrals, and so on.
Yeah. Like basically if you have limited time and energy and resources, like what's the highest leverage thing that you can do in that time period?
Yeah. And I'll just add, like, it's not like we invented this concept, obviously. Like, this is how business has been done forever. One thing I find really interesting, though, that I've been thinking about lately is like often when I talk with agency owners, they say it as a negative when they say, oh, all my business comes from my network, and that's not scalable. But then when you hear from Silicon Valley successful founders or consultants or private equity or whatever, they have a positive view on that. They're like, oh, I do all my business for the last 20 years with these 5 people, and that's like, and granted, there's issues with that. Like in Silicon Valley, it can become incestuous or whatever, but like, it's an interesting dynamic. And my best hypothesis for why that is that as agency owners, like an agency marketing focused people, we get exposed to so many tools and so many shiny objects. So we feel like, and we're doing things for our clients that we can't always do for ourselves. So then we feel like we're broken or we're doing something wrong by relying on our networks, which I can get more into.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes there is a little bit of a tension too. Like if at a certain point you're starting to specialize, and like I think specialization and your personal network might be in tension a little bit. Not that it always has to be, but
yeah.
I think what happens sometimes is if you do have a certain capability and you can, do various types of work for different folks in your network, then you end up being more of a full service agency, but then that doesn't differentiate you when you're trying to kind of scale to the next level.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that where like, I think the key to it isn't so much about the finitude of your network, because your network does grow and so on. It's more about, from what I've experienced, it's more about like the reactive versus proactive element, right? So like if you're getting business strictly reactively, then you're like this boat that's kind of floating around in the water without a sail on it, right? And that's where you become the everything to everyone agency that's harder to defend. But if you can go proactive, and honestly, like a lot of what we're doing with clients, it's not unlike a normal prospecting process. It's just leverage. So instead of going one-to-one, you're going indirect to get multiple referrals to the people you want to meet, basically.
Yeah. Do you want to maybe stop and talk about that for a little bit, kind of how you approach things a little bit differently?
Yeah. And I'll go back to the kind of like what I talked about at the beginning. So like back when I was doing this wrong, and then I see all our clients when they're doing this at the beginning are doing it wrong mostly. I either waited for referrals and just did nothing, or when I was proactive, I'd get, some pep in my step, and I'd go reach out to happy clients and some partners and whoever and say like, hey, I'm looking to meet these titles in these industries or this industry or whatever. Do you know anyone? And I would do that over and over again. And some people had commission agreements, and most of the time I had a lot of polite, nice conversations where nothing happened, and we wasted a lot of time and energy that way. And that's how most of our clients do it. And because like really like what I was doing was I was like picking up a giant haystack and just like plopping it down in front of people and saying like, hey, can you go find me some needles? would that be okay?
Yeah.
And that's what most people do. So what we found, and like, a lot of this is kind of like brick to forehead in hindsight, but it took us like running reps with this from as early as 2020 with clients and then so on. So I didn't figure it out at the beginning. Was a lot of it's just like any other sales marketing funnel. A lot of it's like removing friction for people. That's a big ingredient. And there's a couple things to keep in mind there. One is also like not trying to persuade somebody to help that isn't already willing to help you. So like a lot of the times, the first step, I should back up, is we work with our clients to find the people in their network that they've forgotten about that are already open to helping, which is a lot of people. Like a lot of the times where like people think they're limited, and then we start, even before we start looking at LinkedIn, they're like, wait a second, there's this person, that person, and this client, and like there's like 10 people immediately that would help. So we select these people, and we make sure that there's somebody that A, would be open to sending referral, and B, you'd be open to asking. So like real relationships, not all the fake LinkedIn connections. Can I do a quick rant?
Yeah, no.
Lose your question. One thing that I think is really annoying is that there's so many data tools and software tools, and I'm not knocking all of them, like some of them are useful, but they all are looking at publicly available data and trying to jump and make assumptions based on that data. So saying like, hey, this person's connected to so-and-so, or this person liked this post, and so on. And at this aggregate mass level, that's useful, right? But most of us aren't working at that level. Like if you sell a specialized agency service, you don't have that amount of scale to make that work. So the thing that I think is like is interesting, and where I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, is that relationships are complicated, and there's like this one closed data set that we all have that no one else has access to. Claude doesn't, OpenAI doesn't, and that's the nature of your relationships with the people that you know. So anyway, I bring that up to just be like, if you're willing to, it doesn't even take that much time, but just to take stock of those relationships and like your comfort asking, that's really powerful. So that's the first step. Then we're basically gauging out of that group who might have access, and there's some LinkedIn processes we have for that. And then basically like the game changer is going to them tastefully and being like, hey, instead of, hey, do you know anyone, which creates a lot of work, it's, hey, I saw you might know this specific list of people. Or would you be open to intros so I could be a future resource to them? And a lot of people, like when you reduce the work and you make it easy and you handle all the heavy lifting for them, are willing to help. And it helps our clients get in with some of the biggest companies on earth, with people that would never take the call normally.
Yeah. Because you're basically leveraging the trust that person has with them and with you. And you're basically saying, hey, would you be willing to be a connector? I'll make all the other steps involved really easy for you.
Exactly. That's a major puzzle piece in that equation. I think the first is like pre-selecting the people and not barking up the wrong trees, and then making it easy for sure.
Yeah. Do you, I know a lot of agency founders, especially, they might think, okay, well, you know what, like maybe the answer to my problem is actually just, like I need to hire a salesperson, somebody who already has a network or something like that. I know you tend to push back on that. Can you tell me a little bit more just about like what your thinking is there and why?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it really depends. Like, I wouldn't push back without context and knowing who they're hiring and what they have. But I think that I've made the mistake myself probably multiple times now, gotten it right other times. And I think there's a few things. I think first off is like this is back to this sort of like cloud of influence from other industries, where you really can have like a funnel and a relatively simple product or service, and you plug somebody into it, and then they're closing deals in a few months or less, right? And I think with agency owners, like it really depends on the infrastructure that they have. If they have that existing system that's getting leads and or processes like we have with referrals, and that's already working and they're getting more volume than they can handle, then that's when it starts to make sense. But usually I'd say probably like 80% of the time, what I'm hearing is like I don't like sales. I don't really like to do it. I'm not that good at it. So let me get somebody else to do it. And then also that system's not there. So, and then what happens is the agency ends up asking a salesperson to invent the system for getting revenue, which is like an extremely entrepreneurial task that I'm sure you could hire out that was to somebody that you probably can't afford, but realistically the owners are going to be doing that, or doing at least, managing that, let's say. So that's often what I see. And then from there, like when it does come time, when you do have more leads than you need and you have the system and all this stuff, it's usually about like running, like handing somebody the baton and then like running alongside them for like 6-12 months.
Mm-hmm.
But usually what I see is like, oh, we've hired this person. Nice. I don't have to do sales anymore. And it usually fails.
Yeah. It's like, oh, why is there all of a sudden like no pipeline anymore? And it's like, well, the other thing too that I've seen is that like when a founder is doing it, a lot of times the reason they can sell better is that they can on the fly decide that we're going to like tweak the offer, in order to close a deal. Whereas, maybe there's not that level of freedom that you've given to your sales role. And so they're thinking, okay, like if you hand them a very concise offer, like prepackaged, and you can tell them exactly who it's for, the pain points, like give them a lot of those details, then that's going to be a lot easier thing for them to go and sell. But a lot of times you're asking them to, to essentially productize the offer, and define the ICP. Because sometimes you're bringing on this sales role when they maybe have 3, 4, or 5 ICPs. And it's like,
yeah,
you're just setting them up for failure at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a lot for somebody to juggle. And I think that the issue is like when it comes time to hire a salesperson, you're going to get people that interview really well. You're going to get people that have been very successful, but it's usually within an existing system, right? Where they've slotted into it. They're often not inventing it. But when it comes to, like what we're up to with referrals, what we've seen work really well is like when it does come time to hire that person, the owner is bringing them into the network, right? So they're using their Rolodex to get intros to prospects that are then going to the salesperson. And then the owner's often like maybe on the call or listening to the calls and giving feedback and all that sort of thing, perhaps with help. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. Can you talk a little bit about, I know we've talked about specifically referrals. Where do you see partnerships kind of as part of the puzzle? Like maybe other agencies, things like that. Like, is that kind of part of your framework? How you think about things?
Yes. I think of partnerships as basically phase 2 of this, right? So you have people in your network that are willing to help and so on, and you're asking them and you're being specific with what you want, making it easy. And then what tends to happen is, just like with anything, there tends to be kind of this like Pareto distribution or whatever, where there's a few people that are more willing and able to send leads, either because you've asked for specific ones or they just know what's a good fit now and they're just sending them to you. And then from there, that's where I think it really makes sense to nurture strategic partnerships. There's sort of this push that I think comes from sales quote unquote best practice, like we've been talking about, which is to try to like automate everything and try to systematize everything. And I think there's stuff, and this is like a contrarian belief I have, that is better left non-systematized because it's higher leverage, right? So if you have like 5 partners that are all sending you leads, it would be really stupid to try to treat them all the same way. You'd probably want to figure out like, hey, what do you want? Like what gets you up in the morning? I'd love to see how we can become better partners to each other and like really listen, as opposed to being like, well, let's have a commission structure, a one size fits all commission structure, or even assuming everybody wants commissions. That's where I wasted a lot of time back in the day, is like, you go through all this back and forth with people and then there's no action to take, or somebody's not willing or able to help or whatever. So I think it's important to sort of acknowledge that and to figure out like what's getting them up in the morning. Like some people actively don't want a commission structure because they don't want to be biased. Others will take it but don't care about it. Some people will only care about it when they see the check come in and they won't care about it before that, right? So it's like that's the kind of thing to figure out. Maybe there's other people that you just want to do a marketing collaboration with. But I think it starts with just getting momentum, taking action on it, and then figuring out where the opportunity lives.
Yeah. There's one instance where I referred somebody to an agency, and I wasn't expecting anything in return, but they ended up sending me kind of like a gift box sort of thing where I got to kind of like, it was based off of my interests and whatnot. So it was kind of like, not something that they had to do, but it kind of made me more inclined to, in the future, if I was going to recommend an agency like theirs, that like they'd kind of be at the top of the list.
Yeah.
So I think even sometimes just saying thank you in some way can be a good way to approach that too.
Yeah. That all that stuff helps. Like the gifts can go a long way. And I think like one thing that comes up a lot when we get into this with people is people sometimes, and I felt this too, if you're reaching out and you're saying, hey, can you help me? There's this thought where it's this kind of implicit zero-sum thinking where you're like, I'm taking something from the bank and I need to refill it. And I get that, but I think like really this can be positive sum, either because you do have whatever commission structure or gifting or whatever it is. That's one way to think about it. But aside from that, a lot of the times when people are making intros and you've made it easy for them and you've let them know like how you're handling that call with the prospect, it helps them too. And I've been on both sides of the table. I've had people tell me this where it's like, oh, this is great. This will give me an excuse to get in touch with them again because there's this way we're collaborating, or there's a way we can do business. So I think when you think of it that way, this is really a great way to do prospecting, because it's like, it's more chill. It's more fun. Yeah. It works better. You're not on thousands of calls a week with the wrong people or whatever. So that's the idea.
Yeah, that's such a huge thing too. I think we're in such a hurry to try to figure out how to scale all these things. And it's like, sometimes these high leverage things, you don't want to scale. Yeah. Like, if you have the goose that lays the golden egg, if anything, you want to pamper that goose as much as possible and not try to, I don't know, start a factory farm for the golden geese or something.
Yeah, it's funny about scale because everyone uses that word. I have a book called Relationship Sales and Scale, mostly because it rhymes. But scale is like really, it's just about like doing the same thing like over and over again, and increasing the volume of that thing. And it's like, yeah, there's a time and a place for that, but often it's like it's better to think about like how you can just make it better or transform it when it really matters.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, let's talk about the big elephant in the room in a lot of agencies right now, AI, and kind of how it's affecting agency work. When we talked before, you had kind of a unique point of view on kind of where the real value is. Can you talk a little bit about your thinking there?
Yeah. And, I think like everybody, I don't really know where it's going or how it's going to end up. All I can say is, I can talk about the bets that I'm making, and hopefully that's helpful to people. I think that, of course, there's like massive opportunity in implementing these tools and seeing where they fit in and so on. And like I've, for example, we vibe coded a software product that we're helping clients use that would have been like $50,000 and would have never happened, a few months ago or whatever. So there's the direct application of AI, which is much talked about. But I think one thing that I'm, taking advantage of that I think other clients can too, that's a little bit counterintuitive, is like, you don't necessarily have to just be the AI agency doing AI things. You can also be taking advantage of new opportunities created by AI that are counterintuitive. Like for us, it's hey, attention is harder. It's harder to like get attention and trust with that CMO. So this other thing is now more valuable than it used to be. Mm-hmm. I think I work with PR agencies. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but my understanding is PR is having a bit of a resurgence because of that. And I would guess that there's probably a dozen other examples or ways you could position what you do in that way. And be like, so it doesn't always have to be, hey, we're trying to compete with whatever Claude or the Claude adjacent agency. It could be that you're taking advantage of a thing and giving people refuge from all these changes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like basically, if AI is going to create a bunch of extra noise, how can you zig where everybody else is zagging?
Yeah. And I think we're seeing it. I think probably events are having more of a resurgence than they used to, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I know in the dev agency space, when being able to code something, the value of that is going down because it's a lot easier for people to do it. I think, one of the things that's hard is validating an idea. Like, it's like, oh, we're going to make the MVP, but we don't know whether there's demand for it. Like if your agency did something where you actually do the work of like having some customer interviews or something like that, like after building that version 1 of the tool, that could be kind of a differentiator because it's taking something that doesn't scale and combining it with kind of the typical model.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think the other thing that I might have said before we started recording or the previous conversation was like, I think that agencies have this tremendous opportunity, and not just agencies, but people, let's just say like companies that really, really understand the market. They have this tremendous opportunity to build, digital infrastructure around that and to build products and to create lots of micro products that don't have to have like a major profit center in and of themselves because of how cheap it is to code now. So anyway, I guess like what I would say is play around with it, nights or weekends if you have to. It's fun, and see, like, I sort of feel like almost any process that you take people to could be some version of software. So it's worth thinking about at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything that maybe I didn't ask that you'd really like to, hop on your soapbox for a second and say anything about, or do you feel like we've covered it?
I think we've covered most of it. Yeah. And I think that the biggest thing is just like simplifying and really kind of figuring out what the 80-20 is for you based on like who you want to go after and so on. So that's the main thing. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, awesome, Dan. This has been super fun. For folks that want to talk to you about working with SalesSchema or just want to talk shop with you, or another fellow agency that's just wanting to kind of maybe partner with you, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, SalesSchema.com is probably the best place. My email is dan@salesschema.com, and we have a crash course that basically goes through our whole process, everything involved. I'm not sure when this is going live, but the newest version is going to have all of our templates and everything for a very low price. So I'll get a custom link hooked up, but basically it's salesschema.com/house.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, appreciate it.